I want to go back for clarification to something you whizzed through real quickly in your talk about the psychological roots or lack of psychological roots for the need to be number one. The word machismo went by real fast, and it seemed that you were saying that the need to be number one doesn't come out of some inner psychological need. It comes out of the ruling class's manipulation of media and education. Is that true?
Yes, in a way, not the need. We may have all sorts of needs, and the question is then, how are those needs channelized? They could be channelized into creative forms of competition, which community is going to build the cleaner community, nicer, safer community. You could do it that way. Or it can be channelized into who's going to be tougher, what team is going to win, we're number one. I don't believe that we're possessed by demons. And much of psychoanalysis, much of psychology really postulates that there isn't these demons. They don't call them demons, they call them impulses, needs, complexes, hang-ups, problems, this and that. I don't think we just got that. It's very 14th century. They used to burn people who had those problems in those days. Now we go around and we make the shrinks rich. That's the difference. I think that a lot of that gets manufactured into society. I don't believe necessarily that people wanted to rampage through a street and break windows and beat their horns and yell, yay, because their football team beat the other city's football team. I think that's learned behavior. I think they learned that because that's all their culture gives them. And if you treat the people like a citizenry, as in Athens, where common citizens started to study rhetoric so they could get up in the assembly and speak, then you'll have citizens. And if you treat the people like a rabble, as they did in Rome, screeching, get their heads off, and go to the bread and circuses and don't have a thing on mind, and hail the emperor, hail Caesar, then you'll have a rabble. If you build and you organize your society to produce a rabble, you get a rabble, and if you organize a citizenry, you get a citizenry. So I think it's reductionist to say this is just an outgrowth of our machismo, you see. The thing, number one, the ordinary macho guy isn't really clamoring for America to be number one, but that's what he keeps hearing. He hears his president say it. He hears that that's the thing you got to be. He links that up to his own security and his own well-being. He hears that America is threatened by all sorts of people out there, and the only way he'll survive, and his nation and his family, his community is going to survive, is if we take care of the Russian bear or Gaddafi or the Grenadian menace or whatever. The next day it could be something else, the Sandinistas in Central America. So those are things and cues that are being fed. So what I said is the machismo may be a predispositional set, but it doesn't explain the directions of the policy. Is that clear? How
do you explain the occurrence of war in human history?
Well, that's a big question. The occurrence of war in human history. Well, there are plenty of macho people in Switzerland. How do you explain that the most male chauvinist society doesn't have wars? I mean, you go to Switzerland, there's as many neurotics and machismo people and all sorts of other people. Personality distributions maybe is roughly the same as in any other opinion, but they don't have wars. And they don't have wars in Sweden. So I think there are larger social conditions and interests that explain wars. I do not believe that war is something that just springs from the breast of man. And you don't mean people, you mean man in this case. If men just wanted wars, how do you explain the draft? Why must they be drafted under penalty of 5 years in prison? Why do they go into exile? Why do they try to get 4 Fs? If they just want to go fight and kill. There are those particular kinds of personalities. And during Vietnam, they found a very good place. The Navy pilot who said, I love to hit a virgin building in Vietnam. I really get off on it when I bring my plane down. That tells us something about that Navy pilot that doesn't explain the Vietnam War. Because you could bomb in Mexico, you could bomb in Indonesia, you could bomb in Paraguay, you could bomb in South Africa, you could bomb any number of other countries. Why were you bombing in Vietnam? What's that all about? It doesn't explain why if these guys got to go to war. Even Joseph Goebbels said that. He said, nobody wants to go to war, not even a German. Not even a German. He said, no poor Slav wants to go sit in a freezing trench and have the stink and smell of blood and death and hear the screams of his buddies wounded and lie there with the stink of fear in every pore of his body that he might be killed in the next minute. Nobody wants that, to be torn away from your home, your career, your family. To be sitting in a freezing trench, you'd rather be home in a nice warm bed with your honey. Obviously, None of them want that. You've got to wave a flag in their face, and you've got to convince them that their country is threatened and all that sort of thing. And even that doesn't get it. You finally have to use the coercive power of the state. You've got to draft them. And you've got to say, you go in the army, or you go to prison, or you get shot. Those are your alternatives. So if it was so much in human beings to just want to fight and kill, why must they go through those kind of things? Therefore, I think you have to look at war as something which is the product of social organization. War is not an expression of an individual predisposition. War is the product of a particular and a very elaborate and very technical... I'm sorry, you got to come up to the microphone and I'll be happy to hear you. Or say it louder again. Well, only men don't make wars. Women have been so oppressed in the world that they have not had the opportunities to be in positions of power. And when they have been in positions of power, they make wars. Indira Gandhi made wars. Golda Meir made wars. Margaret Thatcher made wars. She sent men off to die and kill, and she was like any other politician. Oh, that's because they're male. They're operating in a male thing. Okay. They're operating in a macho male psychology. So then it's not what's between your legs that counts, it's what's between your brains. It's the psychology that you're in. That's exactly it. And you've demonstrated my point, that even women, when they are put in that psychology and in that social system, and they're interested in things like power and re-election and territory and economic gain, even women will act like men. And the reason women haven't been doing that through history is because they have been denied access to power.